Welcome to 21st Sports Recap and Analysis for the Pittsburgh Steelers at the Cincinnati Bengals in their Week 14 matchup played December 13, 2015. We're going to go over every possession and the stats and give our breakdown and analysis of this AFC North Division rivalry game. The Bengals had a chance to clinch the division with a win, but the Steelers had other ideas. The Steelers still in the mix, fighting for the division, but more importantly, fighting for the wild card, and they needed a win desperately here. But to start this game off, the Steelers would get the ball first. They started off with it on their own 20. They were faced with a 3rd and 1 from their own 29. Then Roethlisberger hit Wheaton for a 31-yard reception that made a first down in Cincinnati territory at the 40. Then on 3rd and 7 from the Cincinnati 37, Roethlisberger went to Heath Miller. He picked up 10 yards and a first down at the 27. Then they were faced with a 3rd and 3 on the Cincinnati 20, and Roethlisberger went to Antonio Brown. He almost scored a touchdown, but he was down at the 1-yard line with a 19-yard reception that made it 1st and goal. After a run for no gain on first down on 2nd and goal, D'Angelo Williams got it in the end zone with a 1-yard touchdown, and Boswell added the extra point, and it was 7-0 Pittsburgh over Cincinnati with a little less than 9.5 left still in the first. So now the Bengals would get the ball for the first time, and they would get it on their own 10-yard line as there was a penalty on the kickoff that would back them up against their own end zone. Dalton hit A.J. Green for a 17-yard reception on first down to bring it out to the 27. Then on 2nd and 12 from the 25, Dalton went to Tyler Eifert. He picked up 18 yards, and then a penalty for unnecessary roughness would bring the ball into Pittsburgh territory at the 42. They would pick up another first down, and then on 3rd and 10 from the 30, Dalton went back to Eifert. He picked up 24 yards, and now it was 1st and goal on the 6. But on 2nd and goal from the 4, Dalton was intercepted by Tuiit, and when Dalton went to tackle him, Dalton hurt his thumb. So Andy Dalton would lead the game, and he would end up coming out with a cast on his thumb, on his hand. So Andy Dalton doesn't look good. It looks like he might not be able to return during the regular season. Of course, the information is limited due to this injury and what the severity of it is. Will it be something that's 4 to 6 weeks maybe? We shall see. More information to come on that as the week unfolds. But for this game, with that interception that stops the Bengals in the red zone with that turnover, and now Pittsburgh would take over on their own 10-yard line, and they would drive down the field. They got up to midfield, and on 1st and 10 from the 47, Roethlisberger hit Antonio Brown for a 16-yard reception that brought the ball down to the 37, and they would bring the first quarter to a close. They opened up the second quarter with a 3rd and 5 on the Cincinnati 32, and Roethlisberger ends up scrambling for 6 yards and a first down at the 26. A penalty would move them back to their own 41, and they were unable to pick up another first down, and so Boswell would come out to kick a 42-yard field goal. It was up, it was good, and it was now 10-0 Steelers over the Bengals with about 12.5 minutes left before halftime. So now the Bengals will get the ball for the second time in this game. A.J. McCarron under center for Cincinnati. And he moved the Bengals down the field pretty quick and got them into field goal range. But then their drive stalled on the 36. And Mike Nugent would come out to attempt the 54-yard field goal. It looked good, but it was short. So it was accurate, but not long enough. And so this game would remain 10-0. And now the Steelers would take over after the missed field goal. They wasted little time getting into Cincinnati territory, so they started at their own 44. But they got into Cincinnati territory. Their drive would stall at the 29. As on 3rd down, Roethlisberger was sacked by Johnson. And so Boswell came out to kick a 47-yard field goal. It was good. And now it was 13-0. And Pittsburgh over Cincinnati with about 7 minutes left before halftime. So now the Bengals would take over after the kickoff on their own 20. The touchback on the kickoff. Bernard ran for 14 on first down, and now 1st and 10 from the Cincinnati 34. A.J. McCarron airs it out, and A.J. Green takes it 66 yards for the touchdown. Mike Nugent adds the extra point, and now it's a 6-point game as the Bengals trailed the Steelers 13-7. So now the Steelers would take over, and they had the ball on their own 20 after the touchback on the kickoff, and they would move the ball up to midfield and into Cincinnati territory, but their drive stalled right there at the 47, and they would have to punt the ball. And now Cincinnati would take over after the punt, backed up against their own end zone on their own 2-yard line, and the Steelers would hold them to a 3-and-out. And so the Bengals would punt the ball with just over a minute left before halftime. So now Pittsburgh took over with it on their own 46 with about a minute left, and they got it into Cincinnati territory when Roethlisberger hit Bryant for an 18-yard reception that brought the ball to the 36. And then they weren't able to get into the end zone or even the red zone, but they did make it to the 27-yard line, and Boswell came out to kick a 45-yard field goal. It was up, it was good, and it was now 16-7 as the Steelers extended their lead to 9 with about a half a minute left before halftime. So now the Bengals would end up taking a knee after the kickoff to let this clock just run down and take it to the half, down by 9, 16-7. The Bengals would get the ball first in the second half, and they would start off with it on their own 20 after the touchback on the kickoff. And on 2nd and 5 from the 25, William Gay intercepted McCarron and ran it back 23 yards for the pick 6. Chris Boswell added the extra point and was now 23-7 as the Steelers extended their lead to 16 less than a minute into the third quarter. The Bengals would end up with the ball on their own 32 after the kickoff after a 27-yard return by Tuiit, and they would end up moving the ball into field goal range, and Mike Nugent hit a 46-yard field goal to make it 23-10 as they cut the Steelers' lead to 13 with about 10 minutes still left in the third. The Bengals defense would hold the Steelers to a 3-and-out on the next possession, and the Steelers defense would then hold the Bengals to a 3-and-out on their next possession. So now Pittsburgh would get the ball with about 7 minutes still left in the third. They had it on their own 23 after the punt, and they got up to their own 40, and they were faced with a 3rd and 9. Roethlisberger then went to Antonio Brown. He picked up 26 yards in the first down to Cincinnati 34. Then on 3rd and 7 from the Cincinnati 31, Roethlisberger went to Antonio Brown. He picked up 14 yards and a first down, but there was a holding penalty against the defense. Originally, the Steelers declined it, but then Cincinnati challenged the completion and was actually reversed, so it was an incomplete pass. But then now the Steelers would actually accept the penalty, and so that penalty would give the Steelers a first down, as it was 5 yards and the first downs for that holding penalty against the defense. So the Bengals, they did save themselves technically 9 yards there by challenging, but it was still a first down, kind of a waste of a challenge in a way, in a manner of speaking, although that wouldn't really matter in that grand scheme of things in this game. But on the 2nd and 7 from the 23, Roethlisberger went to Miller. He picked up 9 yards, and now it's first down in the red zone at the Cincinnati 14. And they would end up bringing the third quarter to a close as their drive would end up stalling at the 13-yard line. So to open up the fourth quarter, Chris Boswell came out. He kicked a 31-yard field goal, and that made it 26-10 as the Steelers extended their lead to 16 about 5 seconds into the fourth quarter. So now the Bengals would get the ball after the touchback on the kickoff on their own 20. They didn't waste much time getting to midfield. Then they were faced with a 3rd and 2 at the Pittsburgh 49. Bernard then ran 18 yards for the first down at the Pittsburgh 31. McCarron then went to Mohamed Sanu. He picked up 23 yards in the first down in the red zone at the Pittsburgh 8-yard line. But they were not able to get the ball into the end zone. On 3rd and goal from the 5, McCarron was sacked by Hayward, and so Nugent came out to kick a 27-yard field goal. It was up, it was good. It was back to a 13-point game with the Steelers up 26-13 with 10 minutes still left to play in this fourth quarter. So now the Steelers would get the ball on their own 20 after the touchback on the kickoff, and they got up to midfield pretty quick, and they got just into Cincinnati territory at the 47. They're faced with a 2nd and 4, and Roethlisberger was intercepted by Reggie Nelson, and so now Cincinnati would take over after the interception on their own 4-yard line, backed up against their own end zone. They would pick up a first down, a couple of first downs, and they got up to the 28-yard line, but then a holding penalty pushed them back to the 18, and on 1st and 20 from the 18, A.J. McCarron was intercepted by Golden, and so now the Steelers would take right back over. They would start this possession in the red zone at the Cincinnati 16. D'Angelo Williams ran for 10 yards on first down to bring it up to the 6 for a 1st and goal, and then a penalty against Cincinnati would make it 1st and goal on the 1-yard line, and then after a run for no gain, D'Angelo Williams got it in on 2nd and goal with a 1-yard run. Boswell added the extra point, and it was now 33-13 as the Steelers were up by 20 with less than 4 minutes left to play in this game. So that pretty much sealed this one. But with still time on the clock, the Bengals got the ball. They started off with it on their own 20 after the touchback on the kickoff. They got up to midfield and into Pittsburgh territory. And on 2nd and 16, after having been sacked on first down from the 34, as Williams and McCullers sacked McCarron now to bring up 2nd and 16 from the 40. McCarron went to Croft. He picked up 22 yards and a first down the red zone at the Pittsburgh 18 with just about a minute left to play in this game. McCarron then went to Jones. He picked up 13 yards. And now on a 1st and goal from the 5, McCarron goes to Rex Burkhead, and it's a touchdown. Nugent adds the extra point, and so now it's 33-20 with a minute left to play in this game. The Bengals would try the onside kick, and they were not able to recover, and so all that was left to do was for Landry Jones to take a couple knees as the Pittsburgh Steelers go into Cincinnati and pick up a huge win on the road in the division, and they stop the Bengals from clinching the division. Not only that, the Bengals had entered the game with the number 1 spot in the AFC. They were the number 1 seed due to tiebreakers. But now not only do they lose the game, not only do they not clinch, but they also lose 2 of their players. They lost Eifert in this game, and they also lost, of course, Andy Dalton, who left there on the first possession of the game for the Bengals. So those are 2 big losses for Cincinnati, and we'll have to wait and see exactly how long those players are going to be out. Will they make another appearance in the regular season? The Bengals, are already pretty much into the playoffs. But anything can happen at this point. The Steelers getting a huge win now. They're just 2 games back of the Bengals with 3 games left to play. So mathematically, they still have a chance. And so the Bengals came into this day looking to clinch the division. And that was going into the game. That's what I thought was going to happen. But who knew that on the first possession, Dalton would injure his thumb. Don't want to say exactly what the injury is. Don't really know, per se. They're keeping it pretty tight-lipped as to what it is. They're not saying if it's broken, if it's a strain. Of course, the fact that they had him in a cast pretty much immediately, of course, that could just be a precautionary measure, but it doesn't look to bode well for the Bengals. But the Steelers with a 33-20 victory, now 8-5 on the season. They're 3-3 on the road. The Bengals, just their second loss at home this year. They're 5-2 at home, 10-3 on the season. But let's look at the numbers here in this game. Ben Roethlisberger, 30 for 39, 282 passing yards, no touchdowns, 1 interception. D'Angelo Williams, 23 carries for 76 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. He also had 2 receptions for 15 yards in this game, giving him 91 total yards in the game. Antonio Brown had 7 receptions for 87 yards, and Heath Miller had 10 receptions for 66 yards. Wheaton had 4 receptions for 65 yards, and Bryant had 7 receptions for 49 yards. And for the Bengals, Andy Dalton was 3 for 5 before leaving the game, and he had that interception where he ended up injuring himself tackling Tuiit. But A.J. McCarron, in relief of Dalton, came into this game and it was 22 for 32, 280 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Giovanni Bernard had 6 carries for 40 yards. He also had 3 receptions for 27 yards, giving him 67 total yards in the game. Jeremy Hill, just 7 carries for 16 yards. He had 2 receptions for 8 yards, just 24 total yards in the game. A.J. Green, 6 receptions for 132 yards and a touchdown. Marvin Jones, 6 receptions for 61 yards. Tyler Eifert, 2 receptions for 42 yards before leaving the game due to injury. We look at the kickers in this game. Chris Boswell was perfect, 4 for 4 on the field goals, 3 for 3 on the extra points. Mike Nugent, 2 for 3 on the field goals, 2 for 2 on the extra points. And on defense for the Steelers, Allen had a sack, so did Hayward. Williams and McCullers each had a half a sack. William Gay had that touchdown off of the interception. Golden also had an interception. And of course, Tuiit started off with his interception on the first possession, which would eventually lead to the injury by Dalton when he tried to tackle him. And for the Bengals, Reggie Nelson had an interception, and Carlos Dunlap and Michael Johnson each had sacks. We look at the team stats. Both teams had 22 first downs in this game. And on third down, the Steelers were 8 for 14, 57% conversion rate. The Bengals 3 for 8, just 37% on third down. We look at the total net yards, 385 for the Bengals, 353 for the Steelers. Then we look at the net rushing yards, 84 for Pittsburgh, 64 for Cincinnati. Net passing yards, 321 for the Bengals, 270 for the Steelers, as the Bengals allowed 3 sacks for a total of 18 yards lost. I believe those are all against McCarron. And then Roethlisberger was sacked twice, losing a total of 12 yards for Pittsburgh. The penalties in this game, although a lot of penalty yards against the Steelers, just 5 penalties, 82 penalty yards, but it wouldn't end up really mattering too much, as they would go on to win regardless. And the Bengals, just 4 penalties for 27 yards. And there were no fumbles in this game, although we did see some interceptions, as all 3 quarterbacks threw interceptions in this game. The 2 for Cincinnati, which would be 3 interceptions, 2 for McCarron, 1 for A.J. Green, and Roethlisberger also threw an interception. We look at the red zone in this game. 2 for 3 for Pittsburgh, 66%. 1 for 3 for Cincinnati, just 33%. And the time of possession, 35 minutes, 47 seconds for the Steelers, 24 minutes, 13 seconds for the Bengals. So how much is it going to hurt Cincinnati to lose Andy Dalton? Well, A.J. McCarron did all right. I mean, he wasn't that bad. Those interceptions hurt him, though, especially that interception to open up the second half with William Gay running that one back for the pick 6. Is that really kind of like shifted the momentum, any chance the Bengals really had. At that point, it seemed like it took the air out of them. And even so, they kind of stuck around in the game. But especially once D'Angelo Williams scored that touchdown later on, that really, really sealed the deal. But that touchdown to open up the second half at that point, up 23-7, and without Andy Dalton, and pretty much that was the game right there. So for Cincinnati, here on out, they're going to have to rely a lot more heavily on their ground game, which was not very productive in this game. If they're going to win some games without Andy Dalton, they need that ground game to get going. It had seemed to get going recently, but not here in this game. The Steelers were able to shut it down. And Pittsburgh, this is a huge win for them. Without Dalton, the Bengals are going to struggle to win games. In Pittsburgh, if they can win out, they have a chance at possibly taking the division, although that's very unlikely. But that definitely goes a long way to securing a spot for the wild card. They're right in the mix of things with the Jets and, of course, with the Chiefs. But we'll see how that all shapes out. But the Steelers getting a big, performance by their defense. Also, D'Angelo Williams, not a lot of yards, but he was very productive, the 2 touchdowns, and he was eating up the clock. He was getting a lot of carries, and that's what they needed. That's why you see the big time of possession, an advantage of the Steelers, 10 minutes more of possession, because not only the defense kept giving them the ball back, but also they just kept grinding it out with the run with D'Angelo. Even though they weren't getting a lot of yards, they said they were getting the scores. Of course, both of those touchdowns were 1-yard touchdown runs, so they were able to finish, whereas Cincinnati was having trouble finishing. That was a kind of a thing we saw all day here, and a lot of teams struggling in the red zone, but the Steelers getting it done on the road. But let me know what you think in the comments section below. Definitely interested to read your thoughts and opinions. Thank you very much for listening. It's greatly appreciated. I hope you're having a good day and having a great weekend and enjoying all the sports.